Kia ora, Cosmigos. How are we? Good evening. Guten Abend. That's what I was saying in the intro last time. That's German. The episode you're about to watch, I was on a roll. I was just editing it, and I thought, man, yeah, you know me. It normally takes weeks in between episodes, and I thought, well, while I'm on a roll, you better record an intro. But I was thinking, no, I want to get a walk in before the sun sets. Not much of a sunset anyway. So I thought, why not have both? You know that ad? There's a Mexican, she's like, why not Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Mexican cuisine. Oh, and my teeth, because that's the other thing, I haven't brushed my teeth yet. So, but don't worry, I'll probably try and use some sort of filter my mum's just texted me to make it a bit more white. But hey, thank God they haven't developed smell-o-vision, right? Am I right? Actually, I just thought of something. And this is relevant. I promise I'll get to it in the episode in a minute, but this is relevant. This is relevant to the supernatural. I was convinced one night as a child that I had developed smell-o-vision. Yeah, because I remember this because I was in my parents' bedroom watching TV, and unbeknownst to me, dinner was cooking, but I was watching a cooking show with the door closed. I think it was one of those British, I think it was his name Ainsley. It's definitely Ainsley someone, Harriet, I don't know. The British black guy, he's kind of camp, but he's not gay. He might be gay, it's not relevant. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. He's very descriptive. And he's always going, oh, would you look at that? Would you look at that? You can smell that. And he's taking it to the camera. And the thing was, I could smell it. And I knew intellectually, even at that age, that it was not possible for us to have invented smell-o-vision. But I thought I'd genuinely developed like this psi ability to smell the television. And then Mum said, dinner's ready. So that was that. Now, episode 17. This is a continuation of the interview that I did with Daryl. Daryl being one of the two brothers in episode 16. Oh, the Fantel, Pi Waka Waka. Now, they fly around humans. If you're an international viewer, they fly around humans because we've got little insects around us. They're very friendly, but it's also somewhat considered a sign of, I don't know. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to entertain that. It was a positive sign. So after that episode, which in my mind, he's back, in my mind was a bombshell. I don't really care how many views it gets or how successful it is. I'm just so glad that the story was shared, and that for Glenn and for Daryl, the two brothers, we got this historic story cemented in the history books, cemented in silicon. And if you haven't seen it, it's not a prerequisite to this episode, but highly, highly recommend that you watch it because it's a never before told story about UFOs. Now, enough about that. I'm not making an intro all about Mexican cuisine, teeth, smell-o-vision, and talking about the previous episode. No, we're going to launch straight in. It's kind of a part two, but not really. This is my second interview with Daryl, who was interviewed, one of the brothers in episode 16, and it's about some of his other paranormal, supernatural encounters in his life after that UFO sighting when he was, 5-7 years of age in 1973. Now, this is not to preface it to undermine any of the stories by any means. I think Daryl will agree with me. We spoke about this during the interview, that on face value, some of the stories don't seem to necessarily have a definitive scary moment or a climactic apparition, or it's just, there are a bunch of really strange, odd, unexplainable stories. And so when you listen to it, because you may have got accustomed to and perhaps a little spoilt with amazing, impossible stories of goblins and dogmen and werewolves and alien abductions, but when you listen to this, I just want you to put yourself in Daryl's shoes and just imagine what it would be like. Because I think if you do that, you do begin to realize just how strange some of his encounters have been. And in saying that, there are still one or two stories that are genuinely pretty crazy. So, as ever, if you're new, please subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Like and comment and share. It really helps the algorithm. And whilst I work towards monetization and qualifying for that on those platforms, in the meantime, I have a donations link. Cryptocurrency is one option, and there's also a standard Visa, or rather credit and debit card options as well. So they're not expected, but graciously welcomed. Those will be in the show notes on both Spotify and YouTube. So with that said, as ever, this is Season 1, Episode 17, and the title is, insert title here, Remain Curious, keep your eyes to the skies, look at that, and when the phenomenon decides to reach you, I hope that you decide to reach out to Cosmic Banter. Peace! Daryl, welcome back to the Cosmic Banter podcast. Yeah. So,
kind of rolls on from what we've been talking about.
It does. I mean, this will be released a week or two apart, but the listener doesn't need to know that. Well, I guess they do now.
Yeah, they do now. Yeah.
They do now.
Yeah.
Hey, and thanks for chucking your camera on. So this is a video one. So yeah, thanks for telling your story, your side of the story last week with the crazy UFO sighting. Now, you mentioned that you had some other encounters, other strange things happen, and some of them link back to that experience, and maybe others are more recent. Do you want to just take it away with what you've experienced?
Yeah, well, certainly, which I'm pretty sure you discussed with my brother, was years after the incident with UFO or UAPs, as you call them, over Roydvale Primary School. Many years later, I'd probably say we were in our teens. So I might have been 14, 15. Glenn might have been, because he's 3 years older than me, so he could have been 17, 18, somewhere around about there, or maybe 16, I was 13. It's hard to say, but we were in our teens, and we were taking the family dog for a walk. And we always used to do a circuit. So out of the same house, just down from Roydvale Primary School, actually. So we were literally only from Roydvale Primary School where the initial incident happened. Our family's home was only maybe a K away from Roydvale Primary School, because we used to walk to school. That's how we used to get to school. So that evening, my brother and I used to walk the dog, and we'd go out of the family home, and we would start heading sort of towards the field. There's a paddock across the road from the family home. It's now like commercial buildings, but back in those days, it was just a paddock. with horses and all sorts of things. And then further on was the Russley Golf Course, was way further than that. And then the airport was just a bit further from the Russley Golf Course, which anyone that knows Christchurch will know what I'm talking about. So we walked out down the slope of our street, and you turn right and you're heading towards the field that's in front of us. And then we crossed the road and headed towards Memorial Avenue. At that stage, we hadn't seen anything. We were just taking the dog for a little King Charles Cavalier Spaniel, and which we always did. And we came right round the block like we always did with them, just a gentle, quiet walk. And as we came up to our family home again to go inside, we stopped, and in the same field that we'd originally walked out from was this structure. And all I can say is it was like there was no identifying features of it. Like there's no doors, windows, anything like that. But it was huge. Like I'm talking a big structure. And it was sitting in the field. Dog wasn't going nuts though, which is something my brother and I did talk about, but which is odd because usually dogs go crazy, but Benji wasn't. But the structure just sat there, and we looked at it, we thought, what's that? And he looked and we said, well, what's that? I said, I don't know. Now, this conversation seems stupid, but wouldn't you think that paddock across the road, we crossed that at night and in the evenings to go to what we call the recreation centre down by the airport all the time. And with our friends, it's not like we weren't used to this paddock. We've done it all our lives as young kids, and that's what we did as kids back in those days, 70s and 80s and everything. But we didn't. We didn't go across to the structure. We didn't even just cross the road to go to it. We just said, that's weird. What is it? Words to that effect. Don't remember exactly what we said. But what I'm saying is we didn't go over to it. We just looked at this huge structure sitting in this paddock across the road from our family home going, what's that? Pretty sure it wasn't there before. That's what we're probably thinking. But we're looking at it, and then, as I say, no discernible markings or features or windows or doors. And then we went inside, went to our parents and said, there's a big structure across, or shed or whatever we said, across the road. And stupidly we said, where's to this effect, or something like, were there any trucks or something put the structure, well, just why would they at that time of night? It was, probably 7, 8, 9, I don't know, at night. I said, did any trucks go there? Now, our house, the front, the two lounge and living room, the curtains, if you open them, it looks out to the paddock. Did my parents go, no, that's really strange, and open the curtains and look out the window just to see, don't you think that's kind of weird? That there's a big structure sitting in a paddock outside our house. Wasn't there before, hasn't been there since, but it's there at that point in time. They never did. We all just kind of, I just said, I don't know, I remember the exact words, we all kind of went, oh, no. Did we go and have a look at it again? No. Finished. Ended. And that was it. Nothing else. No one went out. No one looked at it. No one bothered about it. Got up the next morning. It's not there. Like,
that's strange.
Bizarre. And then that comes back to exactly what I said about time. And shifting of time. And this is just my theory. I could be completely wrong, but I'm just putting it out there. My theory of what I said earlier on about with our first incident with the UFOs over Roydvale, a shifting of time. It's something I've always believed in. This is how they move through time and twisted, which we don't understand as humans. They're already getting into, as I said, into physics and us not quite understanding what's going on. But I believe that why wouldn't my parents, who are just straight up normal working parents, nothing unusual about them, why don't they just open the curtains or even just wander outside? We're talking about what? That probably would have been 7 years, maybe 1981, somewhere around about there, if you're looking at the time frame. Somewhere around there in the 80s, maybe late 70s, but probably 80s, I would say. But why wouldn't they go out and just look? Why would we go back out and look to a place that's familiar to us? Like, it's not like the paddock's like scary. I mean, that paddock was just normal for us across the road. we as our mates, we used to cross it all the time. We went to go to recreation centre. Didn't care about that. I was never scared of the dark. I used to go and camp by myself out at McLean's Island, so which is not far from Christchurch, out in the bush, because you could do things like that in those days. Your parents let you do stuff like that. Not nowadays. Nowadays. Can now.
But Daryl, that's interesting because, sorry to interrupt, I spoke to your brother Glenn about this as well, and he mentioned the same thing, which is it may not sound like much to the listener, and a lot of these experiences are like this, that you can't quite, it's very personal and it's hard to describe, but it was clearly, I mean, objectively what you've just explained is bizarre, but he made the point too that, you just, neither of you went over and explored it, which would be very unusual for you guys at that age, particularly as it's in your neighborhood. It's not like it's particularly dangerous or scary or...
What was preventing us going over there? What was preventing us just literally walking across the road and just getting closer to it, saying, oh, what's this? It's like there was a barrier, as if we weren't meant to go across the road. Because I can't explain anything else. What else could you explain that? Why did we just walk across to an area that was familiar to us? That paddock, that area, the Rusty pub was just off to the right of it, which doesn't exist anymore. It's a retirement home actually now. But the Rusty pub was here. We were familiar with all that area. We skateboarded around there back in the day, Rusty pub and all those areas. So why didn't we just step over there? Okay, you could say maybe it was our age. Okay, I accept that. But then we go inside and we tell our parents that there's a structure across the road, a big structure. We're talking, did any trucks come in? Well, of course no trucks came and put up a structure when we just walked the dog. It's not going to happen.
It's bizarre. It's that your parents would, because they would be concerned, or if not concerned, at least curious, like, what? The structure across the road. And it didn't require them walking outside. As you say, you could just pull the curtains. So can we just, I know there's not much more to that story as in that happened, that was it, but just to hone in again, to highlight how strange this was, so I've got this right, you're saying that you took the dog for a walk. When you left, there wasn't any structure.
Nothing there. Certainly it was such a noticeable structure that we didn't notice the structure there. And I mean, obviously, a structure that big has to be built.
How big are we talking, roughly?
We're talking like a big warehouse type structure. You're talking, like say I don't know, I wouldn't say it's exactly these dimensions, but if you're looking like at a Bunnings warehouse, something. Yeah, it's a big structure. So I know, when I built lifts back in the time, I'm worked in construction, so it's going to take a fair bit to construct a building of this size or a structure of this size. I won't even call it a building. Just say a structure of this size across the road. It wasn't there the day before. It wasn't there the day before that, you know what I mean? During the day. So all of a sudden it appears at night, and then the next day it's gone. So,
now, how long were you walking? You may have already mentioned this, sorry. How long were you walking the dog for? And before you came back and saw the structure?
Well, we only went around the block. So if you're talking from, just trying to think, we go Windsor Street, Roydvale Ave, Memorial Ave, and around Burnside Crescent. There's only a wee Cabernet King Charles Spaniel. So not that far. Probably half an hour if we really dawdled and yacked, like my brother and I used to all the time. Maybe an hour, but no more than that. But be it maybe half an hour, between half an hour and an hour. Probably more like closer to half an hour. So it wouldn't be.
Let's be conservative and say an hour. Yeah. What set of cranes and everything could come in and drop down a warehouse-sized structure within half an hour to an hour?
Yeah, close to it being a big structure. And the thing is, even saying that, well, surely my parents would hear that.
Exactly.
If we were being silly and saying, look, hey, come on, it's probably just like that. They didn't have flat pack things to the same degree as they do nowadays. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that, they did really quickly pull up. Okay, so my parents didn't hear anything? What, they're going into,
And do you think, I'm picking up on why you mentioned that as a notable feature, the fact that neither of you wanted to go over and your parents weren't interested in opening the curtains. So my question to you then is, and this may lead into your beliefs and your other sort of spooky supernatural encounters, shall we say, do you feel as if there was something else that was preventing you from seeing it or making you disinterested in seeing
To me, there's obviously something that's stopping you going over there. I don't know what it is, but there's no rhyme or reason. And the curious type of guys that we were just your normal teenage dudes that just did normal teenage stupid stuff that we did. There's no reason for us not to have gone across the road. There's no reason why we shouldn't have gone across the road and had a look. So it makes no sense to this day. It makes no sense to me how that whole situation occurred. And once again, this is my whole thing. I could be right off, but this is my whole thing about time. And I've always said it. It's like a time thing. Like it was, that structure was there and then it was gone the next day. Like that stuff just doesn't happen normally. That's just not normal,
No, it's not.
And it's not normal that your parents, who you have a pretty great relationship with, you're going up to them and saying, hey, there's something across the road. It's this big structure, or we might have said shed, but it's big. Did any trucks come in? And as I said, nothing. And it was kind of just left there. Like, it's not even like we have a big discussion, family discussion about it. It's kind of weird. And they'll go on. Nothing. It's just almost to the point of what happened at Roydvale School. It's not the same, but it's similar. Shut down. Finished. End.
Yeah, and it's almost like it would be, not to say it's not interesting, I'm fascinated, but I hear like, if you described the structure as a craft, like a flying saucer, that becomes a whole other story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that the only difference being that it just was a warehouse shape. It's still the same strange phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah.
So elaborating a bit on the time theory, expanding on that a bit, I mean, do you, my initial thoughts are, do you think that it had anything to do with, it was a structure from either the past or the future, or like, I mean, what was the material, or what are your?
I don't know. I mean, it was, the material was obviously whatever it was. It didn't say it's glowing, because I don't think it was, from what I can remember. But it was obviously bright enough that we noticed it.
But is it night time?
Yeah, because it's night. It's dark. So we noticed it in the field, which we didn't notice it when we left. So surely, if we're walking to the right and heading towards the paddocks, we'd notice a structure that big. But then we notice it when we arrive back after walking the dog around the block. Now, to me, that's really pretty odd, and it's the whole thing around the fact that nobody discusses anything. The furthest we discussed it was, that's weird, that's strange, especially considering what had happened to us earlier in Roydvale Primary School, So
yes,
we're not even going to go over there and find out what's going on, what the structure is over there, and then our parents aren't going to. Like, it's bizarre. It's beyond bizarre to me. Doesn't make sense. That whole situation is quite separate, quite a different incident to what happened at Vale. But to me, there's a tie, and there has to be. I can't see how there. I mean, I don't know whether Glenn thinks the same or we have talked about it. No, I think Glenn, because it's so different to the UFO one, that I think he focuses more on the UFO one.
Yes,
he does mention that one, but
yes,
me, I think, because I'm so deep diving on this now, I find that this gnaws away at me as I've got older, like I've discussed with you. That also bothers me, And
it would bother me too. Yeah.
And then what happens years later when I'm in my 20s bothers me again, because a bit of the backstory of that. I mean, I've worked in the security industry pretty close to 40 years. I've just finished up in it, actually, not doing it anymore. So my whole job, from actually when I was underage, I started doing markets and all that, doing security, because you could back in those days, you just got paid cash. But now it's sort of changed. But so I started at 17 when I was 57 in the security industry. So I worked at night all my pretty much adult life. So I'm used to the dark. I actually love nighttime. I love the dark. I love nighttime. It's always been my I actually prefer it to working. I'm working during the day now. I find that quite weird. Don't like it so much. So I've been indoctrinated into this whole night shift thing. So I'm used to traveling, and as most people may or may not know, in security, you don't have a partner. You're by yourself. So you're driving around patrolling or whatever you're doing in the security industry, you're generally by yourself. Okay, so especially if you're on mobile patrols. And so I'm used to the dark, and I'm used to the night. And I've been twice married, and when I was married with my first wife, I could gauge it would have been in my early 20s. And this will tie into pretty much everything going back to the Roydvale primary thing, I believe. Something's tied in. Don't know how, don't know what, but anyway, I'll carry on. So I was in my early 20s, and one night I was asleep we were renting at that stage, and I was just fast asleep at night. I was on a day off, and we're at night, and I just remember all of a sudden waking up, and I had an overwhelming feeling of fear that something was coming, that no matter what I started to do, which was locking doors, making sure windows were closed, it was not going to matter a damn what I was doing. Something was coming, and I couldn't stop whatever was coming. Now, people may construe as, you just had a bad dream or a nightmare. Maybe so, but at the end of the day, to me, it was real. That's how I felt. And as I say, it's not something I generally have ever had in my life. I've never had anything like that in my life, just that once. And it was an absolute overwhelming fear and dread that something horrible was going to happen. I was just locking doors, checking one of my wife at the time, sort of saying, what are you doing? Because she's used to me being up at night and working and not worried about stuff. I'm patrolling everybody else's houses and buildings, but I'm just checking. And I just was overwhelmed with this feeling that something was going to happen. And then it kind of subsided and went. And then I can't remember after that what happened, or I might have just sat there. But all I remember is that point in time I woke up and I had this absolute fear. Now, what is weird about that is a friend of mine who went through Roydvale Primary School with us. Now, this is where it ties in, that I can't remember he had said to me whether he had moved around when I did at Roydvale Primary School and viewing the cricket match frozen and all that. I can't remember whether we had that conversation, but all I know is at the same time that I was having that overwhelming fear of something happening, because I was still friends with him at the time, he was having the same thing at home, but he was home alone by himself, and he was having the same feeling that something was coming, and he couldn't do a damn thing about it.
Wow.
And I can't remember. Don't ask me how long it lasted. I don't know. I can't remember, because once again, that's 33 years ago, probably, or so, 34 years ago. But I do remember it. I remember it happening. Exact points about it I don't remember, but I do remember having an overwhelming fear that something was coming. And Bruce was having exactly the same thing at the same time. So all around about the same time. So, and I remember talking to Glenn about that, telling him this, and he was like, what the heck? Now, that's just whack. Now, yeah, could it be coincidence? Absolutely. It could be one of those weird things that happens in life, but I just found that really strange that, as I say, I've worked in an industry where I'm used to working at night, dealing with some pretty strange things over the years. And, but that particular night was, as I say, it was a crippling fear that something was coming, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. And Bruce was having the same incident. Yeah,
and Bruce described it as a sort of dread and same level of fright.
Yeah, he was Viking. Yeah, and but as I say, I way lost contact with him because we were all up younger then. But so I don't know what he's doing and everything now. Who knows? He may listen to this one day and hear it and go, "Bang, yeah," or maybe not. But all I know is that definitely happens. I remember talking to Glenn about it. He was like, "What the?" He was like, "What the heck?" You know?
Yeah. He told me about it. When I spoke with him,
and
it was
dread, mate. I can tell you right now.
Wow.
And I mean, I've worked on doors. I've been debt collecting. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm some tough guys. I'm certainly not. But I've been in some pretty, as my brother will say, some pretty sticky situations in 40 years. Worked in the hospital doing security there, doing mental health patient restraints and all sorts of things.
Yes.
So I've done a gamut of things in the industry. So I've had my fair share of knocks and dealing with some pretty horrendous situations. This is the way I felt that day. You could be nervous dealing with the situation and security, but my feeling that day was way beyond that. It was at another level. It was a level of, this is way beyond that, way beyond me just being a little bit nervous. I was like struck with fear, like dread, and that's always stuck with me is, why did I have that? Why did he have that?
And it kind of plays into... similar to the previous story about that large warehouse structure, is that with that there was no discernible features and there was not much more to the story, but none of it made sense. So
none of it made
likewise sense. With this sense of dread, neither of you could pinpoint it to anything external that would cause that?
Nope, nothing.
Okay.
Zero.
We did this last episode. I do this most interviews. I should probably have a little jingle, speculation zone. Oh, yes, speculation zone. On a bit of a shoestring budget. So if you'd like a proper jingle, there are 2 donation links in the speculation zone. Because, that is the story. And there is, as far as you're concerned, there's nothing more to it that at least that you can remember. So that's where it kind of has to end. But let's just, for the sake of conversation, you mentioned time and all that. I mean, and again, I don't want to impress my thoughts on what you've just said, but I guess I'm going to do it anyway. But I guess I'm wondering, Daryl, whether, because you had that experience with Bruce, with the UFO sighting, and then you both have the sense of dread for no apparent reason at the exact same time, but you were completely separated.
Yep.
Do you think that there's something to that? There's some connection that stemmed from the original UFO sighting?
Yeah, because I think I've said to you before, there's something that's always gnawed in the back of my mind and bothered me is, why was I able to move around? Why was I able to shift around and look at everybody in that situation at Roydvale Primary School? Why was I don't know how many could, but why was I and say one other able to look around and move around and see things going on, but others were frozen looking up or frozen in a cricket, strike with the bat? Why was I able to shift and move around? And then why later on down the track did I see this structure with my brother, yet we were not struck in fear, but something prevented us going over there? And then why further on down the track, when I was in my early 20s, was I suddenly overwhelmed from nothing? There was no external, there wasn't a noise outside, there was just from nothing. I suddenly woke up and I felt, I've got to lock this place down because I'm in big trouble. I'm in big trouble, and it's beyond. I don't know what that big trouble is, don't get me wrong. I don't know what I thought was happening, but I thought I'm in a lot of danger. And guess what? No matter what I do, I can't do it. And that's all I felt when I was trying to close everything up, is I make sure everything was locked, that it doesn't matter what I do. Doesn't matter what I do. I'm in trouble here. Yeah. That's how I felt anyway,
So what other spooky, unexplained encounters have you had?
Well, I won't name the school because it's still a running school now and there's still people working in and out of it. But in my security industry, one of the jobs I did was I mobile patrols. It's a big part of my job description, I suppose, is mainly mobile patrols. I did a lot of other stuff, doors and deep cleaning over the years, but that absolutely was one of the ones that I did the most. And that involved me patrolling a number of schools. And or a number of these schools, but one in particular is quite an old school. There's a lot of history to it. It goes back a long way. And actually, my father went there as a primary school child he was born in 1931, I think, 30. So he was.
Can you give the suburb at least?
Yeah, it's in Mirabelle, Papanui area.
Okay, just because if people are in Christchurch, that might just narrow it down. But sorry, maybe that's a bit cheeky of me. Yeah,
that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of schools in that area, I can tell you. So, but I went to this. So I'd patrol the grounds all the time at night, and that would make sure that the school, number of schools, not just this school, but a number of schools, make sure they're all locked up. And one night, I went into the alarm activation. I just went into what we called the main block and unset the alarm. And it's quite old stairways at both ends of the corridor, and went up the stairs and along the top. Now, I should actually premise this with the fact that I spoke to a guard a number of times who was an old school East End London boxer that worked in the job with me, and he patrolled on other nights and I didn't patrol. And he used to comment that no matter how, if he went to alarm activations on the same spot, no matter how many times or how warm it was at night, didn't matter how warm it was at night, the minute you walked down to a particular part of this block, it got colder and colder and colder and colder. It could be a boiling hot, one of those warm Christchurch nights, didn't matter, it was cold. And I thought, it's weird, but just in this particular block, in this particular room. Don't ask me why, I don't know what's significant about that, but that's what we always felt. And I said, yeah, you're right, it's quite weird, and didn't think anything else of it, because I don't get spooked easily because of my job. So, you just got to go in there and do your job. But I had an alarm activation in there. So I got an alarm activation in the same classroom, in the same upstairs, down the very back that we had talked about over a period of time. I went down the corridor and they had these old fire doors in the middle of the corridors. And they're heavy. Well, they're heavy, so it would take a pretty big gust of wind to blow. You got to shove through them to get through and then go in. So I went through and pushed through and walked into and then they closed behind me. I hadn't turned the lights on or anything. I just had my Maglite torch, just went through and they closed. Then I walked through and into this classroom, checked the light, everything seemed to be okay. But as I was in there, this is probably about early hours of the morning, 2, 3 in the morning, all of a sudden, I'm standing in this room. It's quiet. I mean, you 2 or 3 in the morning, and I've shut the alarm and everything up. I'm checking the room. All of a sudden, I get, and I put my head round the corner, and the doors have moved as if someone's gone through them. And I mean, these are heavy, old wooden fire exit doors, and there's no wind. There's no wind to blow, with no blowing a gale or anything. It's just doof, doof. And I had a really uneasy feeling. That's when that happened. That coldness you get, that something's not right. Can't explain it, but something's not right. And I thought, nah, I'm out of here. Luckily, I checked the classroom, but I'm out of here. And I went out and down the first stairwell, which is actually off to my right because I've come off from the left-hand stairwell, which is further down. But I just went to the closest stairwell down, checked the classroom, thankfully, before that happened, went out, set the alarm, job done. Now, one of our guys had the same, worse incident than that. He was at the alarm panel of the same block, and he'd unset the alarm, gone and checked out an alarm activation in that block. Can't remember where the alarm activation was, same block. And as he came down to that alarm panel, he was resetting the alarm to set it back up again. He said he had an overwhelming feeling of something coming over him. And then he heard something behind him, like a, I don't know whether he said a growl or something, like he just felt this presence. And he's just a straight up dude. And he was just like, boom, and he's out the door. I'll tell you right now, he never went and set the alarm or unset the alarm in that block ever again. Like, if an alarm activation there, he would unset it from another, because you could do it from a number of panels. He'd unset it and then go and check the building from the external, make sure everything's okay, then reset it up, probably not the best thing to do. You're supposed to go internal, but that's what he did because he said he was so spooked by that incident. And that could have just been, look, it could have been nothing. It could have been a figment of his imagination. Who knows? I don't know. But he's just a straight up guy that works in the industry with me. You know, we all work together.
This is the East Ender geezer.
No. The East Ender geezer was no, this is another guy. The East Ender geezer was just said, he never really experienced it other than the cold. He said he used to just feel the coldness down it. Now, this is another guy altogether. And he hated any time an alarm went off in that block. After that one particular incident where he felt something just enveloping him, when he just went, nah, I'm not doing that again. So anytime we got to say you got an alarm activation, you don't set the alarm from another block, check it externally, and then, everything's fine. Let's set it back up again. As I said, probably not the done thing, but I get it if he's been that spooked. So, yeah.
I know this is secondhand. This is a secondhand story, and you know, so I'm not trying to force any false memories. But I have to visit that. You mentioned maybe he heard a growl.
Yeah.
So he did.
Pretty sure he whether it was a growl or a noise or something come up and like do something like a noise behind him, like whether it was I don't know. I mean, but it was definitely a noise behind him, like something did something behind him, just audibly behind him. And then he felt the enveloping, this feeling of like a pressure of it, which I've felt many times, which I've discussed to you about something further on down the track. So I get that enveloping feeling. It's like an overwhelming feeling that comes over you. You can't explain it, but it's heavy.
Do you get that? Because I've had sleep paralysis, and I know that's common. But are you saying in waking life you get that heavy feeling?
Well, when I've had incidents, I'm awake. I'm well awake. I'm just going about either my job or when I was doing Uber, which is that quite recent one I had.
Can we get into that?
Yeah, I can. Well, there's also, funnily enough, that same school and that same classroom. I had another activation there, and I never I would still go in and do my internal. Not that I enjoyed it, because there was something about that block I didn't like. After what happened to me, it might not seem like much to a lot of people, but when you have that happen with those doors, I'm told this by another guard happened to him. But the other East End London dude is saying, it's really cold down there. I'm getting the same feeling. That happens with the fire doors. I get a really uneasy feeling when I'm in there. So you're never happy going into that block. So I had an alarm activation there one day, same sort of thing, early hours of the morning. I'm like, oh, great. Here we go again. You got to do it. You got to go in there. So I went into this block, and it was the same classroom. Because you can tell when you go to the alarm panel, if anyone's in security will know, a lot of the time will tell you what classroom number it is and what block and da-da-da. But I went up to that alarm panel in that block and it told me what classroom. I went, great. I thought it started there, but it's also gone what they call multiple activation. So it's gone down to the classroom below. So multiple activation means there's other PIRs or passive infrared detectors have gone off. So it's usually a sign of either an intruder or could be a fault, but a lot of the time it can be an indicator of an intruder. So I decided to go to the ground floor one first instead of the one upstairs. So I went to the one that's directly under this classroom. And as I'm going down the corridor, I hear what sounds like a waterfall coming. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And I'm going down the corridor and I'm pushing through those same 4-inch doors, but on the ground floor below. And I come through and I flip the lights on, and there's this torrent of water coming down from the classroom above, that classroom. And I'm like, what the heck? And so I'm getting onto the RT, to the comms, telling them, hey, while I'm going up to the classroom above, saying, you're going to have to get a emergency plumber in here or somebody to shut the water off. I don't know how to shut the water off for the school. You're going to have to get someone in here at the early hours of the morning. But they always had, comms always had numbers that they could ring into the caretaker, all sorts, and key holders. And they said, yep, no, they were on to it as I was going upstairs. And I got upstairs, and yet, sure enough, it was coming from the roof in this classroom, that particular classroom that I'd had the incident way earlier on. The uneasy feeling in the doors and all that, doing that. And it was pouring down. And I thought, it's a busted pipe, I thought, under pressure, I thought, oh, God, it's not good. And so finally, after a period of time, the emergency plumber arrived and he got his ladder out, he'd shut everything off, and he goes up there, and he was an old school guy. He wasn't a young fella, if I remember, and he goes up there, and I could hear him muttering away. And he comes down, and he had a big, I'm not a plumber, but it was like a big, like solid, brassy looking L-shaped pipe fitting. He goes, "Oh, that's weird." He said, "I've never seen that before. When these break, they usually bust off, but they're not a clean break. They'll break. They won't be a clean break, but it's like it's just been sliced, like completely sliced, like that. And the water's poured out, and it's broken the pipe." But he said, usually if it's under pressure, something breaks away for whatever reason, it's going to break away. There'd be a bit of jagged metal, but it's like a clean slice. And I just
like it had been sawn off or something.
Yeah. And I was just like, I don't know what that was, but I was like, okay, I've had enough of this. I just wanted to fix the problem. Let's get the heck out of there, because once you've had a number of uneasy feelings like this, and you talk to your mate, you're just like, nah, I'm over this. I'm just, let's just get this done. And I worked in that job for many years later, and still, I didn't have any more incidents after that. But to be fair, for what I can remember, I don't think I really dealt with that classroom and that block very often, or if at all, that I had alarm activations or anything since then. That was the last incident I had then. I worked with this company for a lot of years. And that was the last incident I had, was that pipe in that class. It was always that blimmin' classroom. So I went, I'm over this. So, yeah, just strange. It was just really, really, really strange, And
I suppose working night shift, you wouldn't necessarily have had anything to do with staff at the school. Did you hear any other stories or rumours about?
Oh, yeah, there were rumours, but I don't know how true that was, because I bumped into cleaners. They never worked late at night though, but I'd heard the rumour that cleaners didn't want to work in that block because I only saw that first, second, third hand because something had happened, but I never really took too much of that, because you can't, because you're only hearing it as a rumour, and I won't get into all that too much of people, because I go, well, yeah, but we all know how fantastical some stories can be. I've always said, I know what's happened to me, and I can only say what's happened to me. So whatever anyone wants to take from that, good or bad, it's totally up to them. Whether they say, "Hey, mate, you just had a nightmare that time when you were locking on," cool, okay, that's what you want to think. But I know intrinsically in me what was happening to me at the time. Mm-hmm. And when you tie into all the other stuff that's happened to me in the past, from a child to that structure, to that, to this, it's just, and then onwards, and some of it's not spooky, but so we don't run out of time, I'll hit those points as well, because there's another two things that have really stuck with me and have done quite late in the piece, from 2022 and to only probably about 6 to 8 months ago or so.
Oh, that's recent. That's exciting.
Recent, yeah.
Hey, before we do, I know you're time bound. Well, I know your wife's coming home soon, but hey, this is important though, mate. Look, I am being cheeky here, but is there any? I know you want to respect privacy and all that. Is there any reason you're not comfortable sharing the name of the school?
Yeah, I think because people still work in those areas and still work there. People still, Reb, I still know a lot of people in the industry and who patrol these areas, and I don't really want to have them. I don't want to put things into their heads that they need to.
Okay. So less of a privacy thing, and more that you believe this is a regular occurrence because you experienced it, and you don't want to scare others who work there.
Yeah, I don't want to put in. I don't want to put
fair enough.
Stuff that people say, "Oh, that's false rubbish," and now people say they don't want to go in there and do that now. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
I know people that go and patrol areas like that have no problem at all. But I've always said some people are very open to experiencing these things, and some people aren't. And I know that for a fact, because I know that for a fact because my family is very, they're East Asian, came from East Asia originally. And so, as you know, in those parts of the country, they're very open to all these spiritual strange, way more so than we are as Westerners, the true Westerners. And I think I don't know whether it's connected to the Roydvale thing, but I just find over a period of time I've been very open. I'm an open book. I'm open to things, and I'm open to believe that there's a lot more stuff out there that goes on that we have no clue about. We think we're very clever, us humans, and we are very clever with a lot of things, but I think there's stuff way beyond what we can fully understand. I think if you look at what's going on now, it's not only the UAP, but with everything, whether you talk about, military doing with data and all the stuff that they're starting to delve into, there's a lot of stuff going on there that we've got no clue about. No clue. Way beyond what you and I can even think about or take in,
Oh yeah.
And, And I'm not even talking about UAP, UFOs. I'm just talking about stuff that our own governments are involved with. And that's, I just don't think we're ever really going to get to I would hope we would, but I don't know whether we'll ever get to the bottom of it because, I just don't know whether we will.
You've looked into, we've had a few chats offline, but you're pretty tuned in. I take it, have you heard of Project Stargate?
Stargate, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just very, very briefly for the listeners who haven't heard of that, that's a program that was run out of the CIA in, I want to say, the 60s or the 50s.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it was the 50s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite early.
Yeah, it was quite early on.
And they were their attempts to explore the world of psychics and whether they could use them for sort of espionage and covert stuff. And the official line is that they concluded the program and no, there's no such, but there've been a number of people who've come forward who worked for Stargate and who have this ability of telepathy, and they call it remote viewing, and
that's right.
and they can and they can sort of spy on I don't know how successfully, and probably to various degrees of success, they can spy on.
I think they were pretty successful. I don't know whether you heard of a guy called Sean Wright.
Yes,
Sean Wright podcast.
Of course.
That's who he's one of the people I follow. I don't follow everything. Don't get me wrong, I don't follow everything. I've always had an interest in the military, not to any huge degree, but just an interest in it because I've had family that went through military, going right back. So I've always had a passing interest in it. So I find some of the things quite fascinating. Not even to do with just UAP, but just some of the people he has on, and not even military stuff. He has some just interesting people. And I'm not saying everything that everyone that comes through is like truthful and is honest, and that's the honest truth. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it is funny that he's interviewed some people that have been like with remote viewing and it's very interesting with what's come out in those interviews. I mean, people need to don't listen to me. Go listen to those sort of podcasts, and then cast your own judgment on what you think. But I'm open to a lot of stuff. I think, as I said, there's so much goes on in this world. And I've had so much that's happened to me that I can't explain. That's why I'm very much open book to believe that there's a lot more out there that we don't quite understand. And that's purely because of what's happened to me, and that, as I've said, I keep saying that gnawing feeling I've had that something went on. I can't explain it. What bothers me is I'm never going to get any answers. And that's actually always bothered me. And I have said that to my brother. I said, what bothers me is I'm going to close my eyes one day. We're in this mortal coil, as they say, and I'm never going to get answers to this. And that bothers me. May not bother other people. It bothers me because it was a pretty big thing in my life. And it may not bother people that may have had this experience. That's cool. If you can just sort of push it aside and get on with life, which I don't get me wrong, I do. I get on with life. I live a good life and everything, but always in the back of my mind and in that background, that's there. And it bothers me that I close my eyes one day, which we all will. And there'll be, other than the fact that I can get it out there with your podcast and more people can understand what, sometimes how people feel and how it can affect them. I think they need to understand that as well. That don't fob them off and just say, oh, what a bunch of Looney Tunes. Maybe just look at them and say, actually, this is affecting these people quite greatly. And maybe look a little bit deeper into that, because it's definitely played on my mind and affected a big chunk of my life. And I know even more so now, because everything's getting revealed more in the world we live in now, that in some ways that's almost becoming bigger for me, because things are coming out now and are being revealed that, hang on, and even government institutions and military institutions all around the world are going, yeah, this stuff is happening. And I'm going, so that kind of makes me feel a bit better, because it makes me think, hey, yeah, this isn't rubbish. There's something out there. There's something going on that we need to explore, and it's affected me, it's affected my brother, it's affected a whole school, and God knows who else it's affected over that period of time. But it's definitely gnawed at me, and I know I've said this to my brother so many times without fear of repeating myself. I do worry that I'm never going to get an answer. If you can understand, I'm never going to get an answer to something that's probably the biggest thing that's happened in my life.
It's closure, right?
Yeah, I know. And I don't honestly, look, Steve, I actually think I'm of the belief. I don't think on our incident and things that happen out there, I've always felt I don't know whether I'll actually ever get closure on it, and that's always a bit of a bother to me.
Is it all
like it? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, and that's just me. It's just a personal thing.
But if it came, if as it already is, there's momentum, as you say, with everything coming out, and just look at all the podcasts. I don't have many episodes, but the small number I do have is that's a sort of similar, a similar thought that my guests have had, is sort of this sort of frustration of, and well, why me? What I can't explain it. And yeah, but if let's say this really ramped up and it came out like a quarter of the world's population all started talking about similar unexplained encounters, would that, at least if not giving you closure, would it ease some of that discomfort?
Yeah, I think because everything's becoming more widely talked about, the subject, and as we've talked about before, it's sort of, they're flipping between science, UAPs, religion, spiritual. It's all intermingling, and noticing as you look at it, it's all intermingling, and
history.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. Whether you go right back to the pyramids and even further back, and it's quite nuts, really, when you think
stories.
About it.
Stories in the Bible, Ezekiel's.
Here's my wife.
Oh, yes, she is. Well, can you get permission for?
Yeah, I might just take you into another room.
Yeah.
And
no,
I'm still going.
Okay. So appreciate your time. Just tell them we won't be too long. We're nearly finished.
We won't be too long. Okay.
Oh, good on you, Daryl.
So,
I know how it can be. She's
dinner.
You've got dinner ready,
Got dinner.
Yeah. But selfishly, I can't let this go. Now I know you have a couple of others. So one of which, for the people watching, they can see in my little logo here, there's an owl. And the reason I put an owl in is because through all the stories that I've heard, the hundreds of hours of supernatural podcasts that I've listened to, there are often themes. And one of the themes is the appearance of owls. And I understand you have some sort of story there.
Yeah, now that's this one here, and this is what I'm saying, where it's sort of ambiguous. It's not necessarily to do with the UFO sightings or any connection with that, but it's what I always believe that there's they call them messengers. Owls very much are messengers, and this is what I'm saying about how I've gone from the Roydvale primary school thing to the structure, to that feeling of dread, to the things that happened in the school with me. I've always seemed to have something. I have seemed to be open to something being revealed, or something, well, I say spiritually, if I want to use that word, or something come across. Now, my mum had passed away in 2022, and I was really close to mum and did a lot with her, and as we all were as kids, but I was very close to mum, and I was patrolling into a forest that's in the middle of Christchurch, and we were looking after a maintenance shed bed or maintenance area right deep in the forest. Like, you have to go back there by yourself in a patrol car, 2-3 in the morning, go all the way to this forest, because the place was getting broken into all the time, which is crazy to think one guy goes in there in a patrol car to do that, but you did. Not just me, other guys too, and ladies. But I went back and I remember I'd gone, done my check, and I was coming out. My mum had passed, and as I say, in September, and this had happened after that, probably only about, or not very far after it, maybe a week, two, maybe a week. And I was coming out. I've gone in and out of that place so many times and never seen anything except maybe a few homeless people jumping in and out of the bushes in the forests. That's about it. But this particular night, I drove out and I got to this area that you got to wait for an auto gate to open. So I stopped, and there was a spotlight sort of just in front of me, some glaring into my eyes, and there was a pole standing there. And all of a sudden, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and this owl came up, landed on this pole, and then just stared at me. It just looked at me. It didn't just look at me. It looked through me. It just looked at me and just kept tilting its head like this. And I thought, and you just get that feeling that this that's how it felt. This is more than just an owl. It's just looking at me, whether it's spiritually, someone say, hey, everything's okay. It's all right. You'll be all right, But it just stared at me, and I had the light behind it. I was trying to get it on my phone. So the cars we used were hybrid, so you could roll forward with you have to just not running. It's on a hybrid battery. So I was trying to roll forward quietly so it wouldn't spook it. So I wanted to get a photo of it. And it just kept looking at me, and just kept tilting its head and looking at me like this. And just as the spotlight came out where I could get a good picture of it, it just looked at me, and it just went off. And I just remember watching it as it went off into the forest, and it just went one big, how the owls stuff grew, just like that. And it just went sweep and disappeared into the forest. And I just had this really eerie feeling that that's more than just an owl. Whether it was spiritually or something saying, your mum's passed, whatever, you're very close, you'll be okay, And that's what I mean about being open to things. I truly believe that it was more than just an owl. It was like a messenger to say everything was all right.
Yes. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah.
But it's just that once again, that eerie feel. I wasn't scared, but it was just an eerie feeling that I've just witnessed something a bit more than just an owl.
And it's very personal, right? It's you can't quite personal. Describe it, but we can't take away from the fact that for you that was a really powerful moment. And I suppose just thinking about it as well, rationally, we're in New Zealand, so what's that? A ruru, a moorpork owl, Not that all owls, I imagine, have similar characteristics, but I can't imagine. I mean, I've seen owls in Australia that you sort of spot them. They're in the trees, and they're watching you because they're quiet. You've spotted them.
Yeah,
but that's bizarre that it
landed right here. I'm in the patrol car waiting for the auto gate, and there's a pole just to my right, and it lands right on the top of this pole and just looks at me.
Just keeps looking at me.
It just keeps looking at me. But as I said, it was like it was looking through me. But not in a evil, nasty way, but it's just looking through me as if like this is more of a connection than just an owl. And when I've talked to family need this and all that, and some of them are open to the fact and say, yeah, there's probably your mum just saying everything's okay. That's what I mean about being open to things like that. And I think that's where I've always found over the years that I'm quite open to that. And that's why you'll generally find where people are experiencers or have experience, and they're generally open to these sort of things, even after they've had an incident like what we had with the UFO. That over the years I've had this, not an ability, but things that sort of crossed my path, which would be deemed pretty unusual, and I would class that pretty unusual.
Yeah. Not
unusual behaviour.
Unusual behaviour, yeah. Well, not that it matters what people think, but what would you say to a skeptical person that would say, well, what you've described, though, is that, okay, you had this incredible encounter with the UFOs, can't take that away from you. Yeah, okay, you had this strange feeling of dread and stuff, but, well, I don't know. But that you've had a couple of these, and so, subconsciously you're now trying to find meaning or look for these things. What would you say to them?
Well, I suppose you could say anything but I've always come back to, it doesn't really matter what anybody else says because it's how I feel, isn't it? Like they can say that to the cows come home. Anybody could say that, but I know on every incident intrinsically how I felt inside of what each incident did to me and how I felt. Yeah, but each is different too, remember?
Yes.
The owl thing is completely different to what happened to us at Roydvale Primary. What I'm saying is I always find that and you'll see that, we've talked about it, there's a crossover between the spiritual, the UFOs, the UAP encounters. And just seeing that in documentation now that there's things that have happened around the world, that there's a connection and there's an intermingling of the two. So it's not necessarily separated. And I'm just saying that I think if you experience something like that, you may be more, not everybody, but you may be more open to experience other things further down the track, and that's where it comes to that. And so, that owl could just be an owl, but to me, that felt more than just an owl.
That's important.
That's important. And now that may be whatever, it's just an owl. Owls do that all the time. Someone did. That's great. That's fine. But until you experience something like that and the feeling you get when you connect with that bird, that's to me. I mean, I say I work at night. I've had birds. I've had all sorts around me over the years, but that particular incident stood out like you wouldn't believe.
Yes,
for me to talk about it today.
Of course, you wouldn't be talking about it. And I suppose that's what I was trying to get at, not to put you on the spot or have to explain yourself. You don't, it's a personal thing. But is that I imagine, like we all do, you've had a number of coincidences in your life that you didn't think were supernatural or anything strange that, that's a bit funny, or even, the odds of that happening are pretty rare. But these instances you're talking about, it's attached to another powerful feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it sinks deeper into me than just, that was we've all, as you say, we've all had coincidences. I mean, dare they say it, they call it deja vu, but what's deja vu? I mean, some people will say that's a bending of time because you've already been there. I mean, people have already talked about deja vu. When you look at it, I mean, I remember there's a game that you used to have, which was I remember it was a diamond-shaped thing, and you had to move little red and things almost like checkers. And I remember sitting at a friend's place, this was when I was young, and I looked at it and I went, I've been here. Same pattern. We've just moved this. I've been here. Okay, so why am I seeing that and I think I've been there? Maybe I have been. Maybe that was, like what my mum said, that the train stations are still back there. It hasn't gone. You've just gone through them. And this is that's my true belief about it. And that may be a bending of time. I mean, it's maybe all it is. It's just a bending. I'm not saying necessarily spiritual woo-woo stuff. I'm just saying it could be a bending of time. And sometimes that shift and that bend of time creates what we love as humans to always put a name to things. So we call it deja vu, but maybe it's more than deja vu. Maybe it's actually a shifting and bending of time. So you have actually gone there. And then in some way, shape or form, you've already seen that. And then you're there and you're back in the present, and then suddenly you arrive at that point that you're already at. Maybe that's the way I look at it. It's a simple way of looking at it, I know, but that's my way of looking at it. And but as I say, humans, people, us in general, we love to put names to things, and as I say, like calling it this, because then it simplifies everything. It's simplified.
We want to explain it, yes.
Yeah, we want to explain it, but we don't really understand it because as I say, you've already got scientists out there now that have this quantum chip and all that, and half they don't even understand what it's going to do, what it's capable of doing. Well, shouldn't we all be a little bit worried about that? That if our experts, I mean, they're way smarter than me, don't even understand what's going on and can't quite explain the physics behind what they're creating, you go, wow, really? That's a bit of a worry, isn't it? So we can simply just go and put something as deja vu or this or that. Well, I think it's a bit more involved than that without being, as I say, without being all woo. I'm not even being spiritual woo-woo about it and saying you're transcendental meditation or anything like that. I'm just saying it's a weird, I can't explain something like that. And I've had that many a times, like, you'll you'd be somewhere and go, God, I've been here before. I remember this. Plenty of people have had that. I'm not the only one that's had that. There's plenty of people in this world that have had that situation where they go, oh, God, I walked into this room and it was exactly how I'd been here. It was quite an uneasy feeling. Then it's over. That's deja vu. Yeah.
And it reminds me of the old simple adage of two things can be true at once. So sometimes that what we call deja vu could be explainable. It's some psychological feature. You literally were there. Something did happen, and you haven't consciously remembered it, but subconsciously you have. And then other times it is something more bizarre, but it's all wrapped up under this label of deja vu. Or someone on LSD sees a UFO. Oh well, okay, they were just on drugs. They didn't see a UFO. Does that mean all UFO sightings aren't real?
Didn't they say that about this whole, which I was a true, this whole drone thing that was happening over, not just the United States, but all around the world. And don't get me wrong, plenty of those were missightings. Absolutely no doubt about it. Yeah, a plane or that's but then hang on, what about the ones where they set the Coast Guard helicopter up, then the drone went black and then disappeared at a high rate of speed? What was that? But that's intermingled in amongst missightings, idiots throwing drones up because they think it's funny. You know what I mean? But it's all intermingled in amongst the drone sightings. But there's something weird going on as well. Yeah,
because the waters are muddied.
Yeah, cool. This is what I said about what we were talking about, how that CIA guy that my brother and I went, look, see, you don't want to know what's going on, the deep, dark secrets, because there's a lot going on that you just wouldn't want to know. And
I wish you'd asked him. We were talking about this offline. Yeah. Well, but, you're right, though. There's some things that you probably, once you do learn them or experience them, you wish you never had.
That's right. Sure. And there's things that people have seen that we will never know or see or learn about because it's something they don't want us to know or learn about, And that's what I meant about these drone signs that were saying, probably maybe some of it was military grade technology, but it sort of messes the whole situation up because they mix it all in. So and
it doesn't explain all the orb sightings. It doesn't explain. There's so many elements, layers to it. Just to write it off.
It's almost like I've always found this certainly with the UAP subject, and even as you could start going into the spiritual, whether you call them ghosts, demons, whatever you want to talk about, that people said they've experienced or seen. Now, what they do is they can convolute the whole thing and mess things up and jumble stuff up, and all the stuff goes in. It all gets mixed into this big potpourri and it's so hard to then take out the stuff that really matters, because they've jumbled so much in there. And governments around the world, they've made a history of doing this. Not even about this subject, just about political stuff. They will just shove all the stuff out. It's called distraction. So they'll distract you over here, but while over here they'll be doing this. I mean, they do it in a simple term of just passing a bill, even in our own country. They'll distract you with something over here, then they'll pass a bill in a night over here, and you're like, hang on, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And this subject's even more involved. So they just jumble everything up. And so it's very hard to extract the real stuff and what matters from the stuff that's been, like the idiot that throws the drone up there, or the 30, 40, 50 people that have seen an actual plane and think it's a drone, But in amongst that, there's something else going on, because there's the air traffic controllers that they had them with the planes. I don't know whether you've heard that, the planes and the air traffic controllers talking between them about seeing something, and they said, well, just take evasive action. What? You've got something in the sky. That's what they say. There's FAA regulations. You're not supposed to have something in the sky. If you or I flew a drone over Christchurch Airport, or your airport was close to you, you'd be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. It's almost bizarre.
It's bizarre because even if it was just completely terrestrial, whether it is the government, whether it is a secret faction of the military, whether it is an adversary like China, whether amongst all this, the orbs and all that, there is some interdimensional element, any of that stuff is mind-blowing, and we're just expected to be like, oh, we're looking into it. And by the way, as we're recording 19th of January, this started first week of December. It's still going on, New Jersey. Still going on. Still going on. But
what you find, and I think what's sad about this, and I'm not saying it's a distraction that's got anything to do with it, because you got the wildfires happening in LA, right? And that's horrific, in the stuff that's going on over there, and and the lives that are not only lost, but the structures and the people displaced, and the just through the roof. You just can't even fathom. I mean, we can to a degree because of the earthquakes we had here in Christchurch, but it's nothing to the level that these people are having to deal with. But so you've got that over there, and then you've got the drone thing still happening over here. It's still going on. It's still there. And I actually saw a recent thing. It was only about 4 days ago on YouTube about the drones. I went, oh yeah, that's right. The drone thing's still going on. But you've got this horrific thing happening over here, which is that's way more important to us as human beings, because that's life, loss. It's important stuff.
Of course, and it's not to dip into the conspiracy of, therefore things like the fires are intentional as a distraction. I think a lot of people get lost down that rabbit hole. They do. But whether it be the media or the government or whoever has an interest in burying a story, they know how to leverage another story over here to their benefit.
Nothing. Absolutely. It's not saying that's because it's not. That's a whole other thing altogether. They've had wildfires for decades over there. They're all well aware. I mean, they've got their own problems with governance and the government, all that. That mistakes that have been made. But I'll leave that in their court. I don't know that. But I mean, that's horrific and that's horrible. I'm not even. So it's not at all connected to that. But all I'm saying is, you're right. They can leverage that. Like, okay, we're going to forget this over here, and to a degree, rightly so, because that's important, especially to mainstream media and all that. But you're always going to get you and the people that are still the Ross Coulthards, the Lou Elizondos, who still look at the LA fires. They may even be affected by it, but people they know that live there and everything. They're not saying, but they still have this over here that they have to deal with, which is the UAP, UFO, and everything else that's connected to it. It doesn't go away. That's just that these people over here, that's just a horrific thing happening over here. That has to be dealt with on a humanity scale. But over here, these people, as I say, you, Ross Coulthard, people with podcasts are involved with that. They've still got to deal with this over here.
I love that you've chucked me in the same category as Ross Coulthard. Well, so if he ever sees this, maybe I'll just clip that and just obsessively message him and listen, mate. Listen, mate. I've been told by a guest of mine that I'm at the same caliber, and I find it pretty rude you're not refined. Hey, that's funny though. You mentioned that you yourself had tried to contact Coulthard, so about the story.
But
his loss for not getting this story. Yeah, we're going to get to the bottom of your UFO story. Hopefully we find some more witnesses.
Yeah, I hope so.
But thank you to you and your brother Glenn. Even if that's all we have, that's really thorough, really, really comprehensive. And I really appreciate your enthusiasm for wanting to get it out.
Because there's still that last one, which was the motel, and now that might be more connected to my family and how I'm more open to the things. And so I'd had that with the owl, and then only about 8 months. No, I'm pretty sure might even be less than that, because as I say, I do Uber on the side, Uber Eats, and I had to deliver Uber Eats to where my family home, the whole home that we've been talking about, with the shed or the structure across the road and just down the road from Roydvale Primary School. Well, our family home got pulled down. My mum and dad sold and went somewhere else. They pulled it down. They put motels in. The motels have been there for quite a period of time. Now, don't get me wrong, I've driven past those motels. I couldn't tell you how many times. I've actually sat outside the motels, just gone, I remember the slope there that I used to go down. And so it's not like I had this horrible connection to it. But this particular night, I had a Uber Eats job. It's the only job we've ever had there, to that place. I had an Uber Eats, to deliver an Uber Eats job. And I think it was Taco Bell. Anyway, doesn't matter. It was Taco Bell to this motel. And I brought it up on our GPS, which Uber Eats uses. And I went, that's our old family home, and that's where the motel is. Didn't think anything of it. Well, I didn't think anything of it. Well, that's weird. And that was all. And then I drove off and then to it, and it takes me there, but I knew where to go anyway. And I drove there, and I drove up the drive into it, and you've got to go right around the buildings to get the place that I was delivering to. And as I drove onto the site, the motel site, all of a sudden I just had this overwhelming feeling, like heaviness I've experienced before, but heavier than most. You know how I said I felt weird with the owl, like it was eerie but not scary. It's like a feeling you get. Same with the one when I was in that classroom. It's a feeling, it's a heaviness, but not like this. This is like an overwhelming, like a blanket that just pushes down over you. And I drove in there going, I'm feeling decidedly uncomfortable being in here. And I don't know why, but so I drove around and I delivered the Taco Bell to where my parents' bedroom would have been. And so I plonked it down, feeling really, really this overwhelming feeling. And I drove out of there, parked in the same place I've parked before, looking at it in a nice way, and lost the plot, crying. And I was quite really emotional and totally overwhelmed, had this feeling still over me. And then in that moment, while I'm having that feeling, I retraced my drive through, and it was like I was driving through my past. Wow. It was like I was driving through my past. It was like as I drove the car through, I went through our living room, our kitchen, our hallway, past my brother's, my bedroom that we shared, past my sister's bedroom to my mum and dad's. And it was this overwhelming, and I could see it. I could see it clearly. Like, that's what I said to you about, I'm a true believer of what my mum said, that there's a past and there's a future. And it's not getting all woo-woo. It's just that they're different times, and they're all intermingled. And like sometimes they come back, and sometimes they're forward, and you go into them. And if you're open to that sort of thing. And yeah, and I remember I came home, and my wife, who's walking my boot, I just lost it with it. I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. And she'll remember that. And it was horrible. It wasn't a nice feeling, but yet that's my family home. And I was brought up in that home. I was born and raised in that home. And
you didn't have any traumatic memories, from my understanding, from what you've explained, of your time there.
No.
So
not to have something like that happen, where I was just this, I don't know, it was just this heaviness, and it overwhelmed me.
Do you think less of it being a memory, or even possibly, let's say, a repressed memory, that it was something external that was influencing how you were feeling again?
Steve, I don't know. I mean, all I know is I've been touched by these things over the years, as I've explained with this podcast, and all right, starting when they're not necessarily connected, but they could be. But starting right at the Roydvale Primary School incident, right through to where I arrived, and what that would have been, probably 2024, that happening, and people could say, and I suppose rightly so, they could say, oh, you felt a bit uneasy because you brought it up on GPS, so you brought it up in your mind. Absolutely. They could be totally and utterly 100% correct. But all I know is how I felt. And maybe I've got a extremely overactive brain that makes these things come apparent to me. And maybe so. Maybe people are quite correct in that, or maybe not. I don't know. But all I know is that was a pretty unusual feeling. I've never had that before. And as I say, I sat outside what used to be my family home many times. I mean, I still live in Christchurch. I've lived here all my life. It's not like it's an unusual place for me to be around. So, yes. And I mean, I patrol past it at night, because I used to go to what's called Civilian Pickering Drive. I used to go there to patrol buildings. So I'd go right past that motel, which was my family home. I never used to sit there and go, oh, that's a bit spooky. But this was just an overwhelming feeling of, I just couldn't shift this blanket off me. It was like, as I said, it was like I felt like I was going through my past. I felt like I was reliving my past, like going through it. It was very hard to explain. It was a weird feeling. And yes, I've certainly been touched by them. But I think maybe, I don't know, but this is what's always bothered me. Like I said to you, I've always been bothered about what happened. It's going back to the original sighting. And I can't explain it. It bothers me that I'm not going to get closure on it. And it bothers me that are these some things along the way connected? I don't know. But I've had a few things happen over the years that it just bothered me, you know. And some may say, hey, you've got a very, very, high imagination? But certainly not as far as the original sighting, and even the one with the because my brother and I both saw the structure as well.
Yes,
certainly the Roydvale Primary School one.
Yes,
you can make up lots of things about everything else, and that's fine. That's just my story. You know, that's what I'm sharing with everybody. That's just my story. So everyone can make of it what they want. That's fine. But I believe somewhere along the way, things at times, whether you call it spiritually, whatever, it's connected somewhere. And as we've talked about, they've proved it started to get intermingled in laws. But as far as the Roydvale Primary School things go, no, that one there, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that is the biggest thing that's happened to me in my life, ever. So, and something I can't explain. So, or my brother, or anyone else that's, that we know that did talk about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be sensational when I say this, particularly as it benefits me to have a great story like that, but that's got to be, in terms of overall New Zealand history, that's going to be one of the more incredible stories. And I'm so glad we've been able to uncover at least your and your brother's perspective. And hopefully, if anyone's listening again, who experienced something in either the summer of 73 or 74 around Burnside, Christchurch, or even just anywhere around the airport, reach out to me, and I'd love to talk to you, and I could perhaps put you in touch with Glenn and Daryl if they want. So, but you watch this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope something comes about it. If nothing else, it's to a degree. Should I say it's like I don't know whether Glenn feels the same, but I certainly feel it's like a weight off to actually just get the story out there. Whatever people think, actually, that I'm built this way. I don't really care what people think. I don't care what people think of me, or because I'm way beyond that. I'm 59 years of age. I'm not really too worried, or 58, not really too worried about what people think. I mean, I know what happened, and I know the experience I had, my brother had, and other people had. So people can make up whatever they want from it, but I'm just glad I've got it out there. And to a degree, you're right, it's probably a slight weight off that to actually be able to tell the story and be able to relive these things and actually at least get it out there in the public forum so people can make up their own minds, and maybe something will come of it, maybe.
Yep. And to anyone listening who's new to this topic, get used to that same line. I know what I saw. I know what I experienced, and no one can take that away. No. Even if there's there's holes in the story, or there's explainable, ways of explaining it. You know what it was like for you, and that's all that matters, and that's all that the show really ultimately is about, is to give a platform for experiencers like yourself to share without judgment and discuss. So thank you so much. Hey, enjoy your tea and enjoy the rest of and enjoy the rest of the Jake Barber interview, because it gets supernatural. So
I'll be watching that tonight. I'll be watching it tonight.
Yes.
So I only just started watching, and because I've done a few things on the UAP, I thought I'm just going to watch that because, as you know, it's obviously a huge interest to me. So let
me know what you think.
I will definitely.
That's great.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the opportunity, mate, to at least get my side of the story out there, and my brother's as well, giving him the opportunity, because it's a pretty big thing. And as I say, when it's been such a big part of my life, Glenn would have said the same thing, that it's the biggest thing that's ever happened to us, and in life. So hopefully something will come of it, and we'll hear from a few people that maybe haven't come forward.
And if not, at least it's out there. It's out there.
It's not lost. Well, it's not lost in time.
Lost to history.
That's it.
Cool.
Thanks, Steve.
That's great. On that note, yeah, thanks, and you have a lovely evening. We'll chat soon.
You too.
Cheers, Daryl.
Okay, thanks, mate. See you.